Hey guys, it's Igor and I'm back once again with part 5 of my Drawing a Cat tutorial video series. And in this video all we're going to try to do is finish up the painting. We're going to hopefully clean up a little bit around the paws once again and get to the fish, draw them in quickly, crudely, but at the same time still try to make sure that they don't take away from the painting. Do a little bit of the foreground elements like the aquarium base as well as maybe the mug that's not necessarily foreground, it's more midground. But anyways, let's get right into it. As always, thanks for watching and enjoy. Alright, so here we are back in Procreate. And the first thing that I'm going to want to check again is what layer am I on? What did I last work on? So here I have the kitty opened up. We can turn his layer on and off. And what I actually want to do is quickly go to the layer below. And if you look here, we have this ugly little spot behind the, let me grab a better eraser for this. Let's go to the round brush eraser. Behind the paw here that we drew on top of, we have this extra bit of color here that I just want to get rid of to help give the paw a little bit of a more defining shape, and so it doesn't look like there's some weird growth on his finger, because that's always maybe not really something that you want to add into your painting. Alright, the cat overall I think just needs a little bit of love, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually merge these two layers together now. I'm going to grab the round brush that we normally work in, lower the opacity a bit. I mean the brush size. The opacity will still keep at like that 50% mark. So grabbing some of these colors near the edge, I just want to make the edge not as sharp as it is, as we see it here. I just want to blur it out a bit. Also, that means going in and softening up the edges of the arms. Would they even be considered arms? Legs? I don't know. The cat's equivalent of arms. The front legs. Okay. So just taking a quick look. Trying to avoid really sharp symmetrical edges or geometrical. And now we can move on to the next part, which would be the mug. So here we have the mug on two separate layers. We have the line art, which if we remove, kind of makes the mug lose its shape. But the cool thing is, we don't even have to really remove it. If we layer lock the mug, we can grab a slightly larger brush and then near the line art, just choose a local color from the mug itself. So you see I have the line art here. I'm gonna select this purple that's next to it, and I'm just gonna draw over that line art. So that line art's gonna get filled with that purple color. Along the bottom here, I'm gonna go with a slightly darker color, and I'm gonna push down lighter because I don't want to fully cover up that line art, but because I want a little bit of that form to show. But I do want to soften it so that it's not so contrasting to the rest of the painting. Here along the edge of the handle, I'm going to use a slightly lighter purple, and along the bottom we now have this kind of bluish color that we can pick up and manipulate into our cup. Alright, going in along the edges here, just again selecting colors. And as you can see, now if I enable and disable, we can see the line art, but it matches the object that was underneath it a lot better. So I'm gonna go ahead and collapse those, and now I'm just gonna make fine adjustments by myself. So I grabbed again the local color, which in this case is sort of a bluish tint of purple, and I'm gonna grab this darker blue along the bottom here to just lightly enforce the form of the mug, and then we're gonna scribble a little shadow down there. Now, one other way to make this mug look more mug-like is we're gonna grab this purple and we're gonna do a slight highlight. And I do mean slight. If we go too light, there's going to be a lot of variation, and I'm also going to unlock this layer. As you can see, between the color fill and the line art, there was an empty line. If you really care about those things, which I often do, and you want to take the time to render your piece out, go ahead and take care of those little gaps. So I'm just using this slightly lighter color to give some more presence to the mug, I guess. But I'm not gonna worry about it too much ultimately. It's just another way of adding more to the image. More character, so that it's not so empty. Okay, I think that actually will do. Maybe we'll grab some of this blue here and straighten that line out a bit. Alright, the mug is done, and it's on its own layer. Now we take a look at the aquarium base. We can actually do the same technique here. We're going to just lock the sketch layer of the base here, and let's grab a saturated brown color. Again, the reason why I'm going with a saturated color is we want to draw in the shaded parts, the darker parts, with a more saturated color. And saturated means it has more color within whatever you select. This would be desaturated here on the scale. That's a lot more gray, and then saturated would be here. For those that don't know, I don't even know the exact technical term, of how much color is within a hue or some other stuff like that. I just know that that's what saturated and desaturated means. So hopefully you guys aren't confused when I'm talking about that. Alright, going through, and a lot of these lines, I just feel like I should scribble in that darker brown, because the next step that I imagine I'm gonna do is just collapse the sketch layer into this fill layer. Just combine them all. Here I'm gonna go in with a small eraser and carve out the line art around this anchor so that it's a little bit more precise. So we had some extra sketch lines within that kind of made it look really sloppy or rushed or rough, whatever way you want to explain it. But here I just went in and took care of them. Erase a little bit on that edge. And then finally, for the anchor, I think the next step would be to, I think I'm looking around and I'm pretty sure I'm just gonna collapse all of this. Here I'm gonna erase a couple of these wild sketch marks that are just up in the air for no reason. Now let's go ahead and merge this down. Now again, looking back, I see a few gaps here and there, and we do not like gaps in our drawings. This isn't the London look. We are looking for, I guess, more of a clean approach. It's just, you have to be able to know when it's okay to leave something looking rough and when you should clean something up. Because if you're going to keep your entire painting rough, fine, then your painting will be rough. But if you have, let's say, 70% of your painting rendered and looking clean, and then all of a sudden this object that's surrounded by things that aren't so rough is super sketchy, then it's going to stand out and it's not going to look very good. So definitely fill in those gaps, otherwise you might get some unwanted color peeking through. And then when you become more experienced, you will go ahead and you will choose colors, you know, that you'd want kind of seeping through. Or if you're doing some sort of tree canopy scene or something, then you might have colors that you'd purposely like peeking through, like some sky colors or something. I don't know, but that's not the case with this piece. So all I'm doing, if you guys are kind of frustrated at me not really being sidetracked but just talking about things that aren't directly represented on the screen, then let me just get back to it. So all I was doing was cleaning up edges, getting rid of really rough looking pencil lines, and I'm still doing that. So I actually picked up some of the blue color from the aquarium background because, first of all, I can, but second of all, I find it easier to be able to blend colors on the top layer. You know, I could use an eraser, but the way doing it this way will speed up time, because using an eraser will often result in a really rough edge, like a really sharp edge with no texture. So then you would want to redraw whatever you just erased, whether that's into using making it a smoother line or keeping it the same, using the same idea. But either way, watch, if I'm using an eraser right now and I carve into it, and then suddenly, you know, it's a really sharp looking edge, and that's okay if you're doing something like an anchor, a robot arm, or something along those lines. But when it's rocks or dirt, or maybe things like a tree or leaves, you're gonna want to probably go back and reblend them. So here I want to fix the anchor shape because the left side doesn't match the right side. I don't want to spend too much time on this thing. All I'm going to do is, instead of using the eraser, like I said, I'm just going to grab that background color, grab a darker gray, because this is the underside of the anchor, and then let's use this blue on the inside as well. Now I cut into it a little bit too much, so all I do is I grab a little bit of that lighter gray once again and clean it up. Same thing for the underside. We're going to use a lighter color on the underside because it's facing upwards towards our light source, right? Another thing we want to do is probably get rid of this really dark line out here. It doesn't really belong because of what I was just mentioning, is that our light source is directly above this anchor. Maybe not directly above, but it is above. So here I'm going in and erasing some more rough edges. Just a little bit of cleanup. As well as along the bottom side of the aquarium here. See, I could actually spend a long time doing this, and I advise those who feel like they, you know, enjoy rendering their paintings out, go ahead and do that. The longer you spend on a piece, kind of perfecting it and getting it to its, you know, your best version of it possible, is really cool for multiple reasons. You'll have kind of a benchmark of, you know, your ability, and then when you improve later on and you look back at your piece and you're like, man, I could have and should have changed so much stuff, you get to see, you know, your progression. You're able to, I do that all the time. I look back at my pieces and I'm just like, man, I could have, why didn't I, you know, just make this minor change? It would have done so much. So instead of getting sort of down on yourself, you should be fairly excited that, you know, there's progress, you're growing. Alright, I'm just grabbing some of this brown here and trying to blend it out kind of quickly and roughly, but just to show that the anchor is in fact in the ground. Then we can use some of these orange, really bright orange colors to highlight the top parts of these pebbles on the sides. It wouldn't work so much in the middle because that's where we just picked this color from, but if I wanted to, I could go in and even choose a slightly lighter orange color and do a few areas of pebbles with that lighter color, which I might do, but we'll just see how this looks. And I even have a different example of a painting that I've been working on that I might do a time-lapse video of, but I did the rocks. I spent a lot more time on doing the foreground rocks and all that, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. But that'll give you an idea of that technique being applied here, because I basically did the same exact thing. It was just a, you know, figure out the direction of your lighting, and you draw the rock in whatever color. So if it's a darker rock, because, you know, rocks vary in color and size and shape, you know, draw your rocks in first, give them some shadows, you know, and use the shadows to kind of build a shape. So let's grab this darker brown, actually a more saturated color. So we're going to shape this rock, and then later on when you go in with highlights, that's how this rock will become an object. That's how it's going to start looking three-dimensional, and, you know, it's the combination of shadow and light that makes it look the way it does. Alright, cutting off that little sketched edge for a more cleaner look, and now going in with a lighter color, a much lighter color at that, and let's try it out. Maybe it'll be too light, so very lightly pressing down so that I'm not overdoing it. I'm just going to, even on the random ground parts, because after all, this is, you know, little pebbles and sand and all that. Alright, as well as a little bit of highlights on this side. And finally, let's go ahead and add a little bit of highlights on the anchor. It's probably too much, but I mean, it still looks pretty cool. I feel like we'll keep it, whatever. Good enough. Alright, that is on its own layer. Let's now head over to the fishies. And for the fish, I'm going to do another technique, which is I'm just gonna lower the opacity a little bit on the line art. I'm gonna collapse it. I know it's kind of, I think it'll mainly work for something that's a little bit more simple, that you're not trying to spend too much time on. And the reason for that is, make sure you unlock the layer. And the reason for that is, a really complex piece, if you have a lot of line art that needs adjusting and fixing, you know, you'll end up spending a lot of time switching over to your eraser and going in and doing this and that, where you're just erasing for majority of the time. But here, with a little fish, where the base shape, you know, is more than enough to just get us started, we don't really have to worry about that. We just make adjustments on the go, and we kind of let whatever's already there help us make the fish look, you know, good enough, I guess. Here I'm going to grab a off-white, very desaturated yellow color, slight highlight for that, and I'm going to grab this yellow but go in a more saturated and much darker direction to do the eyeball. Boop. Nope, let me undo the eyeball position. Let's put it more in the front. And I'll even go ahead and drop a small highlight on the eyeball. Now, one eye just looks weird. So let's add the hint of another, because these are huge bulging eyes. Sorry about that. My neighbor's having some sort of car problems. I'm not even sure. So he's just been sitting here winding his engine like he's about to take off. It's, I don't know. This neighborhood, I'm telling you, it is something else. Alright, I'm gonna quickly scribble in. No, you know what? I don't like how that looks. Instead, I want a slightly softer brush. Let's try the old brush. This thing's kind of weird. I'm gonna... it's a little bit too weird. This might do. So for the fin, let's get these size up a bit. Oh yeah, that'll do. I'm gonna go for slightly more saturated color. And I'll show you the brush that I'm using in a second. I just grabbed something and tested it out real quick. But it seems to flow very nicely and mix pretty well. So that'll be a great fin brush. You know, take advantage of its properties. So the brush that I'm using is a wet flat brush, and it is stock 100%. I didn't change anything on it. But see, because it blends the way it does, you kind of have to play around with it a little bit to get it to handle how you want. Alright, and now I'm going to highlight the fish itself, because it's probably got like a shiny... Man, it is really mixing with some random stuff. Let's go back to our regular round brush for the highlight. If I really wanted to, I could do tiny shell pattern, scale pattern, but I'm not going to do that. We're just some scribbles. There we go. That's our little fishy. That's fishy 1. Then we move on. We've got fishy 2. Grab the eraser right away and chop off any excess things that I don't want. Again, this wouldn't really work as well on a really complex giant object because there would be a lot of cutting. Yeah, you could, but I feel like, you know, whatever the process is, as long as it works for you, it's probably the right one. And I've heard other people say that, but in reality, that's how I feel as well, because I was really confused about what I should do when in a digital painting. It was really intimidating for me, but after I learned my own methods, I just adapt somebody else's techniques, you know, into my technique that has been working for me over time, and just small little additions and changes are probably the most ideal ways of, you know, going about creating a painting. It's really hard to try and copy somebody's brushes and all of that unless you already do something that's very similar. I mean, I guess you could just sit there and grind it out until it becomes like your own thing. I'm really tempted to close the window, but it's so hot I'm gonna melt. Let's try the flat brush actually. We're gonna experiment with brushes today. This one doesn't mix as crazy, but I feel like that's a good thing. Alright guys, I'm gonna close the window for the duration of this this car doing its thing. So 1 second. Okay, I am back. That was really annoying. It's like there's no escaping any of this. One day it'll be, you know, crazy kids doing ridiculous stuff. Although, I guess we were pretty crazy as kids too. My brother and our friends would do some really dumb things. Alright, second eyeball. We're going to keep the spirit of the design from the first fish alive here. I don't know where that came from, but let's erase it. I'm drawing this eyeball. I'm going to go darker underneath. We're still using that flat brush, by the way. But again, if you've seen me work with the regular round brush, all of that could be done with it as well. So a slight highlight. Grab a dark color. Eyeball. Pupil thing, add that in there, and the reflection from the direction of the lamp. As soon as I close my window, he stops doing that really annoying sound too. It's like they're watching me. They're like, oh, his window's open, hurry, make a lot of random noise. And as soon as he closes it, he's gone, guys. That's what it feels like. Alright, doing some more highlights on the second eyeball. I feel like this fish is a little bit too desaturated. He's not eating his fish food. The yellow fish has been stealing all of it. I kind of miss having an aquarium. Might be good to get another one. That way I always have some references for the fish drawing. Alright, we've got our fish. I'm going to lock this layer for a second, grab this green color and go in with something darker. And again, darker generally means something more saturated. And I'm going to quickly put down a base kind of gradients for the shadow, as well as right here. I feel like I might take too long with these fish, so I'm going to try to hurry it up, otherwise it's going to be another 50-minute video. And let's do a darker tail. Again, the layer's locked, so there's no worry of drawing outside of whatever we already have here. Yeah, I like the darker tail, the darker fins. So let's darken up this fin up top. Might as well do all of them. Keep a little edge of that fin not dark, to maybe show that that's the little tendon that moves the fin, or whatever it's called. I don't know fish anatomy. Alright, grabbing some colors, mixing here and there. And then finally, hold on, before I highlight it, I'm going to clean up that nose because that still had a lot of pencil lines in there. And then we're gonna grab a highlight color. And for this little guy, we're gonna do a slightly different technique. So lighter circles to indicate some scales. You could do U shapes, but I think this might actually look better. And then along the nose here, where the fish's bones typically are, so that area is a bit more rough and generally has a really solid color. I feel like I need to add more contrast to it, but I can do that on the end with some of the adjustment tools. Grab this darker eyeball color and go around that edge there. Alright, cool. Let's move on to the next fish. Actually, let's put in that second pupil. Yeah, I like that. That works. Alright, we are on our third fish. Let's unlock the layer. Again, we just swipe to the right to lock and unlock. So go ahead and do that. Switch over to our eraser and redraw the fin with the flat brush that we have selected right there. As you can see, it does not say modified because I have not modified anything to it. This flat brush is pretty good for getting these really soft tail fins. I think that's a good example of how a brush can speed up work for you, but you don't necessarily even have to use it that often. And that's definitely the case for me. I feel like I've probably only used this brush a handful of times for completely different reasons. So it's really cool to kind of quickly find a solution for it on the go, or not a solution, a use for it. I'll go ahead and cut around these little sketch marks. We gotta get the butt fins up in here. It's too big. There's probably a more scientific and less crude way of calling them, but you know, I find it humorous, so I'll keep doing that. Alright, fin on the side, colored in. Now we can lock the layer just in case. Grab a gray color for the eyes again. Notice how I'm not going straight to white. I feel like that's too easy, and often it'll make your drawing look probably more cartoony than you want. I'm going to unlock this layer because I'm confident in my ability not to fully screw this up. So what I'm doing is expanding the circles, the eyeball circles. Let's grab the same lighter gray color that we've got on our green fish. Let's go down to some darker tone or value, and go ahead and draw in the pupils. Alright, I am probably going to speed up after this fish, and then after the fish are done, then I'm going to slow it back down. We're going to take a look at the whole painting, but I'm going to speed it up, showing you the painting in real, well, from this perspective instead of the Procreate playback feature, so you could still see if I select any weird brushes or anything like that. And you know, maybe I'll even talk over the fast forwarding. I just don't want to make you guys sit here for too long, so let's go ahead and do that. Alright, and I will be back after I'm done here. Alright guys, now we're into the sped up portion where I'm going through and trying to color the fish. So what you see me do is follow a basic pattern of cleaning up the silhouette. So I erase any little extras that I might have from merging the two layers. And then I tried to add some shadows and then some highlights. And that's a very kind of broken down version, but in reality, you know, these fish are really small and don't have too much detail. I mean, you could, if you technically wanted to put some crazy amount of work into them, you could do that. But for the sake of time and, you know, trying to complete this video all in one sitting, at least for part 5, I just went ahead and did some basic stuff. So you see me cleaning up the nose on the yellow fish a bit. I think that color doesn't work too well, and I think that's my biggest criticism of the fish for this piece in general is the variety of colors. I don't know if they're really harmonious, but nevertheless, you see me cutting out the fins with an eraser and redrawing them using a softer brush, and you will see that I think for this last fish as well. And I'm just using the flat brush and the regular round brush for most of these parts of the fish. Okay, I think for now I am somewhat satisfied with what we've got here. So the next thing I want to do is hit the little adjustments tab, and we're gonna play around with some of the colors and see what we can do. So using the curve, I'm gonna want to bump the brightness up and increase the contrast, because some of these look very, I don't know, not as good as I want them to. Now, next thing I want to do is I'm gonna actually bump the saturation down just a little bit. And then let's go back into this this piece again. I actually think that's not too bad. They all have a slight blue tint to them, and I think that works really well with sort of the idea for this painting. What else did I want to do? I want to go ahead and add a few bubbles. For the bubbles, all we do is we select some sort of lighter color and grab a fairly small brush and go in and make some circles. Now we use the lighter color to kind of show that the air bubble is reflecting air or reflecting highlights off of its surface. So that's why we don't do, you know, a full circle. But even if we did have, let's say, this sort of, that's too dark, this blue here, we could grab a highlight and drop it in the direction of the lamp that we've got going on, but I'm not going to do that. So for these bubbles that are going to be on top of the cat, I'm going to want stronger highlights along the edges. And we could make a few smaller bubbles, which are, let me go back to the fish layer real quick and erase this before I forget. But yeah, make a few smaller bubbles, because if you've ever blown bubbles underwater, then you would notice that they expand as they go outwards. So same idea here, same principle. You know, why not? And I think these bubbles up here don't really make sense right now. But once we create a trail for them, then we could kind of see, like this bubble here would have to have done this, you know, and that doesn't really work. So we won't worry about putting that one there. Make sure we're on our bubble layer once again. A few smaller ones. And then just gonna give all the fish some bubbles. actually think I want to add a yellow lamp glow into the background. So that's going to be my next step after this. And then I think I want the background either slightly more blurred or something along those lines. So we'll have to see. All right, let's go ahead and merge the bubbles down with the fish. And for our background, create a new layer. And let's try out this wet flat brush. What I want to do is grab a yellow color, and we'll see how quickly this goes down. It's not dangerously quick. No, I don't think I'm going to do the blue background, but I might use this brush to no, that's okay. Alright, what else can I do that'll make this scene look more believable? I think the next step would be to put a layer between the fish and the aquarium itself, and that's going to be the wall. So in order to do that, I'm going to want to use the Nico rule again. I've already used it before for some of these textures, and I think if we grab this kind of bluish color and even towards the green a bit to kind of show algae or something that may have grown, I think it'd be cool to put a little bit of that blue into the ground on the bottom as well. I think I did also say I wanted to add some claws to our kitty cat, so I might do that. Right here I'm going to select the contents, create a new layer on top of this ground layer that we have going on, and I'm going to play around with it a bit. Actually, I just thought of an easier way to make changes to it. So I'm going to release the content layer, and I'm going to go to the adjustments tab, and we're going to color balance. Now what I want to get rid of is all that orange. I want to tone it down just a bit. So for the midtones, we're going to tone down a bit of the yellows. And for the low colors, nah, I don't really like that. Okay, instead we can do not the color balance, we can go to curves and get rid of the red, and we can do that by moving the top of this chart downwards and moving the bottom out in this direction. And then we can actually add blues if we would like, by just playing around with the settings a little bit here and there. Now unfortunately the anchor gets affected, so now it's really blue, and I do not like that all too much. So what I'm going to do is erase the little edges that I had drawn in when I was trying to fix up all the rocks. Make sure the layer is locked. Grab this gray and probably pick a more desaturated color to put in its place. We're going to lose a little bit of form on our anchor, but it's not too scary. It's a really easy object to color in and figure out, you know, what's what. And finally, I want to clean up these blue edges a bit more. And then I think the ground will be done. I like that I got rid of a lot of the orange. Even though, you know, it'll work in a scene that's very, what's the word I'm looking for? Complementary color based, I guess. You know, that would work. But toning it down, it's still kind of a complementary color thing going on, but it's not as kind of demanding for the viewer to look in that direction. Now I'm going to also add a vignette, which is that filter that you guys might know on Instagram. All I'm going to do is grab a big soft brush, do some sort of gray color. So we're going to grab this gray color and go softly around the edges. And then if we go ahead and choose a multiply, it'll darken it. And then we can go to the layer opacity and we can play around with, you know, either having it all the way dark or not so dark. I'm also going to turn down the brightness of the fish here. I don't like that I have some in different color, and like that really light one on the right, it's especially bright. And one way I can fix that is I can select its contents, create a new layer, and put in something slightly darker gray over it. As you can see, unfortunately, because the edges are so soft, it doesn't always properly lay on top of it. So as you can see, just doing an overlay layer darkens it up quite a bit. It looks sort of weird, but that's not too bad. I can, for the parts that I don't want the overlay to apply on, like the eyeball, I could erase that. Actually, it just gets even darker, so that's not so bad. Let's merge that down. And this is just little final touches, you know, that I could just say, okay, I'm done. But the longer you spend on this section of the painting, either the more finished and polished your product will look, or, well, your painting, or, you know, you might mess it up and then you could choose to either undo that, or it wouldn't even make a difference, you know, because you spent time on touching up details that are so minor that nobody even notices them. So it's kind of like a balance. Figure out what you'd like to do. Let's lower the opacity and the brush size here, and I want to darken this eyeball just a little bit. Alright. There's some much heavier contrast on that fish now, and it makes me kind of want to go back and fix the contrast on all of these fish, but you know, that's what happens when I still kind of rushed through it, and that's okay. I don't feel bad because, you know, the fish aren't really the focus of the painting. It's the kitty cat. And if I really wanted to, I could spend more time to make them all look really nice and make sense and whatnot, but I don't want to do that. Okay, we are more or less done, but another thing that I could do before finishing it all up is, oh yeah, the kitty's claws. I'm just gonna zoom in, grab a darker color. The nails might not look good though. Nah, I don't like them. One thing that might work though is the layer between the mug and the aquarium itself. If I go back to that Nico rule, all I have to do is grab a very subtle color gradation. Actually, I'm going to do this on a separate layer because I might have to tone it down. Yeah, I'll definitely tone it down. I'm just gonna splash it all over the place. We can blur it a bit. Just a little bit. 7%. And then I'm gonna lower the opacity on it. Now, if I wanted to, say, really make this look like glass, but I'm not going to because that would sort of affect the idea behind the painting entirely, what I could do is create a new layer, use a lighter color, much lighter color, grab, say, the HB pencil, and go in and add a crack. Right? And something like that would make it very apparent that, you know, this is glass. And if the idea behind the painting was like, yo, I'm about to get you guys, and then the fish are all panicking and freaking out, then maybe I would have kept it, but this is just to show you guys, you know, this is another possibility. You just have to think creatively how you want your perspective. If it's something that's really weird, or you're kind of pushing it, and it's not entirely super easy to recognize, you know, you can change it up and kind of be like, what the, oh, okay, so he's leaning up against something. But yeah, basically, if I wanted to, I could have done something like this, but I'm not going to do that, so let's erase it. So this is the piece. One other thing that I want to do real quick before ending the video here, I'm going to make sure that the eyes are still, they still have that contrast in them. One other thing that I want to do is just collapse everything down. Now, if you want to keep stuff on a separate layer, go ahead and do that. The reason that I'm collapsing this thing is if I ever do return in the future to working on it some more, I can manipulate, I'll just, you know, end up redrawing things that I don't like, but dropping it down into a single layer allows me to manipulate everything at once. So now if I hit the curves tab, you see me tweaking everything all together. Let me undo that blue and grab the entire balance of the painting. Oh, my fingers are like drawing random stuff. All right, let's keep merging it down. And even the vignette looking like thing. So now any adjustments you make to the scene will be, it'll be made as a whole. You know, I can turn up the saturation and really hurt my eyes, or turn it down and kind of see what the black and white values would look like. I think we can turn down the saturation just a little bit. Here we can shift the hue over. I'm going to keep it where it's at. And I think that is it. Let's just for fun, horizontally flip. I think flipping it now kind of helps me see that the green fish, I should have moved the nose a little bit further down, so more to the left if you're looking at it from this side. But other than that, whatever. I think she'll do. So let's grab our pencil and lastly sign our piece off. There we go. Awesome. Okay, I can export it. So you go to share artwork. And not only that, but I actually remembered that I wanted to show you guys the other piece that I was working on, and here is the ground that I did. Using that technique, you can kind of see some sketch lines in here. There's some shadows, not really any highlights, but just a lot of variation. You know, thinking about this planet is being lit from almost all around up above, so the shadows aren't very big and they're not cast in a specific direction, but they are in the cracks and underneath the rocks as much as possible. So I don't know if I'll be doing a video on this piece, but yeah, I just thought I'd share that with you. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned something. The fish were kind of annoying to work on, and you know, I'm not sitting in the most comfortable position. But anyways, as always, you know, hope you like it. Hope you learned something from it. Stay tuned for, I think the iPad review will be the next video that I do. And, you know, possibly more videos in the future. So yeah, as always, have a good one, and I will see you later.